Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. Violence against ICE agents calls for harsher enforcement actions. In what sounds like third world dangers, ICE agents and other federal officers assisting in immigration enforcement have been targeted in 2 ambushes that took place in Texas recently. The Department of Justice listed 10 individuals charged in relation to the first incident when the suspects opened fire on correctional officers outside the Prairie Land Detention Center in Alvarado, Texas on the 4th of July. Sadly, one officer was shot in the neck, but fortunately will survive. The attack started with fireworks being shot at the facility. When the officers responded, apparently shots were fired. In addition, there was vandalism of official vehicles. A second incident was a man was killed after reportedly opening fire at a U.S. Border Patrol facility in McAllen, Texas, which is near the Mexican border. Ryan Luis Moscada, 27, was fatally shot after federal agents returned fire. He reportedly had an assault rifle and was carrying a utility vest at the time of the incident. Texas is openly supporting ICE's efforts, so these attacks in the state are especially notable. Enough is enough. Some really bad people are being detained by ICE and removed from our society. Anyone encouraging any interference with their efforts, politicians or civilians, must be dealt with harshly and quickly at the federal level.
All rise.
China threatens other countries. Reports are that China is attempting to tell other countries not to make tariff deals with USA. I note that this demonstrates both the power of China and its desperation. While the Trump administration claims that China is engaged in some tariff talks with the US, although keep in mind the definition of a deal is that the other side complies and China cheats.
How does the defendant plead?
Horrific Louisville plane crash. I want to extend my deepest sympathies to the families impacted by the terrible UPS plane crash. Most Americans have seen the video of the fireball that ran for half a mile as an aged cargo plane lost an engine while taking off with a full load of fuel. While there were only 3 crew members, 11 persons on the ground died in the extended crash site. I had the opportunity a couple years ago to fly in and out of Louisville for a conference. It was a great visit, and I wish the town and its residents a timely recovery from this tragedy.
Please proceed.
And a bit of good political news. Senate Republicans confirmed 48 Trump nominees. Finally, the log jam has been broken. Traditionally, the party that is not in power in the Senate goes along with all but the most controversial picks for appointments by the current president. Of course, Chucky Schumer has been following the current Dem playbook to hurt everyday Americans just to block everything that Trump does. Well, he was outmaneuvered this time as the GOP-controlled Senate changed the rules to get things rolling. The Dems did this to help former President Obama about a decade ago. So a simple majority, not 60 votes, is required in the Senate right now for confirmation.
Sustained.
Mexico City caution flag. In the midst of the busy summer travel season, Trump has declared that some changes to a key airport hub in huge Mexico City are a violation of a treaty between the 2 countries. I was not aware of this. But Mexico City has opened a new airport, the Felipe Angeles Airport, about 30 miles outside the city, according to reports. Mexican domestic flights are getting priority to the original Benito Juarez Airport, which is closer into the city. This would obviously give the domestic carriers a big cost or convenience advantage. Specifically mentioned was a cooperation agreement between Delta Airlines and Aeromexico, which could be suspended due to this dispute. Given the importance of American tourists to Mexico, this could be another short-lived spat between the 2 neighboring countries.
Motion denied.
Mike Waltz out as National Security Advisor to President Trump. This was sort of expected as fallout from the heavily reported deal where a clown editor from The Atlantic was linked into a confidential conference call regarding the bombing of the Houthis in Yemen. Trump named Marco Rubio to do double duty as the NSA, National Security Advisor, until a replacement is named there. In the meantime, Waltz will be nominated as the new UN ambassador. I still would like to know how the clown's phone number was even in such a place to be even looped into that call.
Please raise your right hand.
Man sucked into a jet engine in Milan. Thanks to iHeartRadio's newsletter for this report. 35-year-old man died after being sucked into a jet engine at Milan's airport on July 8th. Somehow this sorry guy found his way from his car onto the field where the big Airbus had an engine that pulled him in. Authorities do not know if he was trying to commit suicide or was trying to board the moving jetliner.
Objection, Your Honor.
Firebombing of the Pennsylvania governor's mansion. In something that's hard to conceptualize, an individual who appeared to have anti-Semitic hatred somehow climbed over a wall, broke into the mansion late at night, firebombing 2 rooms. Even though the governor and his family were in the mansion at the time, fortunately, nobody was injured. The damages are reported to be extensive. The issue underscores a serious issue of violence in America, driven by political positions. In my lifetime, I have never seen it reach this pitch. Polls indicate that a significant percentage of liberals feel that even killing Trump or Musk would be okay. This is a horrendous report, and I hope people were engaging in hyperbole and do not really feel that way. Gosh almighty.
May I remind you, you're still under oath.
Budget shutdown looms. Chucky is not the brightest bulb, and his unreasonable demands to allow a temporary budget deal are not going to advance the Dem cause for sure. My understanding is that the Dems want to reverse the GOP's attempted to clean up Medicaid, and they also are demanding free medical care for illegals. Being a member of the majority of Americans who work for their medical care, nobody I know favors giving medical benefits to able-bodied persons who could work and earn their own medical care. That same majority do not want free medical care for illegals. The Dems are in a less than 20% position on these slots. It is disruptive for all to have a government shutdown. Sadly, it does not save any money in the long run. So most Americans do not want to shut down. This would seem to be a bipartisan issue.
Silence in the court.
Department of Justice is probing BLM for fraud. Several years back, I heard a report that the leader of the BLM movement put family on the payroll and had a mansion paid for from BLM funds. Of course, that was during the Biden-Harris administration. There was no real investigation. I've heard that this bogus movement took in about $100 million. Well, those who sent money in deserve to have it wasted, in my humble opinion. The Justice Department is finally doing a fraud investigation of BLM. Way too late, in my opinion, but glad it is happening.
I'll allow it.
Sad story of domestic terrorism. By now, everyone has heard of the tragic story from Minnesota of 2 assassinated and 2 shot by a crazed appointee of Governor Walz. I believe the man's wife has been taken in for questioning as well. The shooter disguised himself as a police officer and made his car look like one. In the car, he had many powerful weapons, which fortunately, since he got separated from the car, he was not able to use. The local police realized the situation, and the shooter somehow escaped, but was apprehended a couple days later. Leaving the car behind, a manifesto was discovered and a list of targets in addition to the cache of weapons. This was a politically motivated campaign. Most of the slopstream media have been quiet about it, but this was someone who was a Democrat and appears to have attacked other Democrats for not being as far left as he was. The good news is that the feds have him in custody, which means the death penalty is on the table. In the meantime, 2 other Democrat politicians have decided to get attention and violate the rules of a civilized society. An unknown California senator, Alex Padilla, charged into a Kristi Noem press conference without a suit or his congressional pin and ran toward her. Fortunately, guards intercepted him and cuffed him. I would like to see him prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. How does this differ from J6, folks? Then a remote candidate for New York City Mayor Brad Lander decided to physically interfere in the arrest of an illegal at the courthouse after the person was in the custody of ICE. He was also cuffed and arrested. I call for prison time to make the point that it is that era when it's time to respect the law. How can we get civilians to behave when the elected officials are part of the problem? The sad thing is that the whole society has moved into this wave of violence. In Houston, incidents called road rage have erupted. This is so bad that the police are running focus operations to intercept some of the bad actors and calm it down. When I moved to Houston many years ago, there were road signs all around that said drive friendly. Hey, time to bring some of those signs back. This is Dr. David D. Schein. Thanks for joining me for this special edition of Saving America. Remember, a new Saving America show is aired on the Brushwood Media Network every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Listen on any of the 16 network stations, Apple or Google mobile app, Apple CarPlay, TuneIn, Smart Speaker, and all smart TVs. Find more information at the brushwoodmedianetwork.com. Please be sure to join us each week. We welcome and love your feedback from our growing audience.
Order in the court.
And our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. And when you hear this guest story, I know you're going to agree with me. Saving America welcomes Professor Amy Wax. She's presently professor at the law school at the University of Pennsylvania, which is the trigger for this interview. More on that in a bit. Her incredible educational background is BS in biochemistry and biophysics from Yale, followed by a medical degree cum laude with distinction in neuroscience from Harvard, then practices medicine in New York for 5 years with a residency in neurology. So while working as a doctor, she earns her law degree from Columbia University, where she became an editor of the Columbia Law Review, won numerous awards. Then, as a full-time attorney, she clerked for a federal judge. She then went on to teach at 2 top law schools, University of Virginia and then at Penn, her present law school faculty position. Penn's law school is about as far left as you can get. Professor Wax has been open about her concerns regarding minority students and also about participation of certain minorities in politics. This has caused a firestorm at Penn. I had to cut this bio short, otherwise there'd be no time for our interview. I want to quickly note that I obtained my BA at Penn and have 2 graduate degrees from the University of Virginia. We welcome Professor Amy Wax for her first appearance on Saving America.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me.
It's our pleasure. So, as you know, we ask our guests 3 questions. As a careful reader and conservative who has personally taught at an HBCU, I do comprehend your comments about Black students in higher education. Why were your comments mischaracterized by your fellow academics and others as racist?
Well, first of all, let me just address the term racist. The term is used very prolifically and very promiscuously in the current atmosphere. It's thrown around as a weapon. And when people are called racist, they usually tremble and retreat because, you know, in some quarters it's the worst thing you can be called. But my view of it is that the word is ill-defined. When I ask people, why do you call me a racist? Can you define the term? They can't. And when I do get a definition, I get, you know, something different every time. So that's made me a lot, you know, less wary of that term. I think it is a fertile ground for abuse and misuse. And I've been called it so much that it's kind of lost its sting. So I do not, you know, it depends on your definition. You know, am I a racist? Am I not a racist? I don't spend a lot of time worrying about that. I really have to tell you. I spend a lot of time worrying about the future of our republic. I spend time worrying about the quality and honesty and integrity of academia, about the decline of our civilization, about the abandonment of Western values, about the dilution of the meritocracy, which is a very important part of our strength as a country, as a high-achieving part of the globe. Those are the things that I worry about. So, you know, the racism label is something that just doesn't keep me up at night, I have to tell you honestly.
And part of this was statistics, wasn't it, in terms of what exactly was the performance of different groups in your school? Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, the point I was making, this was a conversation with Glenn Lowry, who is a black professor at Brown, an economics professor, very intelligent man, very wide interests. One of his interests is obviously the future of Black America, affirmative action, how affirmative action works, what its consequences are. And we were talking about some of the downsides of affirmative action. One of the downsides, of course, is that blacks are overplaced through affirmative action. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that they end up attending schools that where the average student has higher scores, is more academically capable than they are. And part of the consequences of that, and we can discuss and argue about the consequences of that, whether they're good or bad. And I didn't sit there saying, oh, it's all bad. There's arguments to be made on both sides. I said one of the downsides of that is that they struggle to do well academically. That's just kind of what you would expect, right? I mean, if you are someone with a 650 math SAT, which is actually pretty good, and you're put in a class where everybody has an 800, at MIT or wherever, you are going to face an uphill struggle. You are very likely you're going to probably not get an A, maybe not even get a B, because the course is geared to the 800 person. But if you went to a small college where the averages were in the 600s, you might actually paradoxically learn more. That's called the mismatch effect. That's different from the overplacement effect. The mismatch effect, which has been described, is that if you are overplaced, not only will you do relatively poorly, but you'll actually learn less than if you go to a place where you're well matched to the other people, because of, maybe there's a discouragement effect, or maybe it's all going to fly over your head. I don't know, but nobody really wants to look at it because they don't want to acknowledge it. Now, this is all a perfectly valid set of discussions and concerns about affirmative action, pro and con. As I tell my students, this is a policy question. Are we going to have affirmative action? So we ought to be able to discuss all of the aspects of it without becoming hysterical. But weirdly enough, these schools have decided that the proper tactic is to just bury and hide the truth, which is the, underachievement, so to speak, of a lower grade pattern of affirmative action admits. They think that somehow by hiding that, people aren't going to find out. Well, I have news for you. The law firms know it. The judges know it. The people whose maw we're feeding. We're an HR department for all these people, of course. They know it. They end up overplacing students anyway because they're under pressure to engage in affirmative action. But at the end of the day, it does not end very well. Because sooner or later the buck stops, as you know. But these are valid conversations. But it was quite strongly signaled to me through my dean bringing charges against me and other attempts to penalize me and sanction me that this could not be said on campus.
Yes, I'm going to interrupt you there because I want to keep the interview short. And I know both of us are pressed for time, but I want to switch gears just a little bit because I'm going to come back around to your situation with UPenn. And again, we both have been there. You're there now. I was there. Parallel to the first situation that you encountered, you've made comments about Asians in America participating as Democrats rather than Republicans. Could you please share more about your position on this? Because this also got some flack, although it seems like a very innocent statement.
Can you state that again? Which Americans?
Sure.
Asian
Americans.
Oh, Asian Americans. Yes. I mean, so this was, people keep saying I said this on a podcast, which is not true. It was a discussion following a podcast with an Asian friend of mine, George Lee, who is a stalwart Republican and a stalwart conservative and is Chinese. And we were discussing the perplexity of why Asians vote so overwhelmingly for Democrats, as Jews do, of course, because it would not seem to be in their interest. Asians are meritocrats. They are very bourgeois. They're very law-abiding. They're very hardworking. They have, so many virtues. Their families are strong. And you would think that, a lot of what the Democrats are peddling would not be appealing to them. The lack of being behind law and order, the lack of interest in the meritocracy, their pushing of equity, some of their permissive policies wouldn't gel with Asians. So why do they all vote for Democrats? And we couldn't come up with a theory really that was entirely satisfactory. A lot of it has to do with immigration, with Republicans being identified with Christians as being depicted as intolerant. I mean, there's all sorts of misconceptions and conceptions out there. But at the end of this interchange, I said, well, as a Republican who believes in the core Republican values, my view is we're better off with fewer Asians as long as they're voting for Democrats, because they're going to push the country, I think, in the wrong direction. There are other cultural reasons, I think, why we shouldn't be overwhelmed by Asians. It is a different culture. It is a more conformist culture. People say this to me all the time. Even Asians say it to me, right? They're not as concerned with, liberties, rights, the First Amendment, free speech. They think it's like some fetish that white people have, they should get over. It's just a different mentality. And all told, so this soundbite was lifted out of a much more complicated discussion. Like I was some kind of bigot, like I hate Asians. No, I have a lot of Asian friends. I'm thinking more generally about the direction of our country, about which party I think, should be in control, and also my general penchant for immigration restriction. I am very much an immigration restrictionist, especially from non-Western countries. And you put it all together and you get this little sound bite that was like ballyhooed everywhere to prove that I am an evil person.
Mhm.
But
And
you have to read the actual exchange. Yeah.
linking that to our third question, which is you get quoted, and a lot of people in the public eye get quoted on sound bites rather than in the context of what they said. And
It's
so
unbelievable. I have
you've run
learned that the
into,
hard way. Yeah.
as I called it, a firestorm at UPenn, which is a very probably one of the most liberal schools, probably the 10 or 12 most liberal schools in the country, though it's getting harder to use that identity because there's been such protest on relatively small schools and remote schools. But a report I read said you were offered $50,000 to reach a compromise with Penn, but you turned it down. Why did you pass on the deal, and what has happened to you with regard to the Penn administration or the Penn Law School administration?
Well, this has to do with, the fact that they did impose a penalty on me. It was quite a severe one, frankly, financially. Well, first of all, they're going to suspend me for a year. As I tell people, I have no idea what that means. I think it means I don't teach for a year. But then cut my salary in half for a year, my base salary, my core salary, and then no more summer money ever. And if you put all that money together, and I teach for another 8 or 9 years, it's almost $500,000 that they are docking me, and that is serious money. Okay. Now, as part of the negotiations, they were willing to let up on that a little bit, but the core of the financial penalty was still there. And they just threw in an extra $50,000, because of the loss of my summer money, which is $50,000 a summer. A one-time payment that I was somehow supposed to placate me. Well, frankly, sir, that is chicken feed, okay? That is chicken feed. I mean, maybe if they'd said 500,000, I would have considered it, and they can well afford that. But the real sticking point is something I find outrageous and dishonorable on their part. which is they wanted me to sign a clause that said that I would never speak about the case they had brought against me, the hearing, the proceedings, the lack of due process, the fabrications and the falsehoods, the dishonest sound bites that twist my words, their pursuit of me, everything they've done to me. It's been going on for 2.5 years. I wouldn't talk about their hypocrisy, their double standard, the way they treated people after October 7th versus me, and all the awful things they've done. I wouldn't speak about any of that. Silence. They wanted silence. Well, why would they want that? Why would they want that? I'm told, oh, that's routine. Well, it shouldn't be routine. I mean, what is and what ought to be are very different, aren't they?
Absolutely.
And to me, that is just trying to escape accountability. And a academic institution should be all about intellectual rigor, intellectual honesty, accountability. If you're going to do something to a professor, get out there and defend it in an honest way. Explain it. Go through the particulars. Don't hide behind, a muzzling clause or confidentiality. Confidentiality is supposed to protect me, not them. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to worry about it. They don't want to have to explain it. Well, what good are they then? Why are they even here? Okay, they might as well go and work as stockbrokers as far as I'm concerned. And the students know it's bogus. Oh, the students fully understand that they are saying one thing and doing another. There are these regular sort of little cases that come out of the massive bureaucracy that is Penn. Oh, we want people to be able to talk across difference, speak their mind, not self-censor. That is laughable. That is risible. It really is. It's ludicrous.
It's so amazing. And we want to be respectful of your time. We so much appreciate it today.
I have an hour for here, so I've allocated. Yep.
How can our audience get more information about you and your career? You said you're on a lot of different sites. I found you on Wikipedia.
Well, Wikipedia, I wouldn't trust. Wikipedia has gone off the deep end, lefty-wise. If they Google me and, articles, go on Google Scholar, which is an open website, or just Google me. I've done a lot of pieces lately because, law reviews won't publish me now that I'm a racist. On Law and Liberty, on the Claremont Review, on the American Conservative. There are these websites that I now have published a number of pieces on recently. Also, I've done a lot of podcasts recently. It's during the time that Penn has been bringing this case against me. It's been very time consuming, and I've in some ways been acting as my own lawyer. I've been working with a lawyer, but I've been very, very involved in what is said and what arguments are made, of course. And I used to be a litigator, and I'm the one who sort of has inside knowledge of what's going on. So that's been terribly time consuming. But I've done a lot of podcasts which are on YouTube with people like Glenn Lowry, Richard Hanania, other people, Louise Perry, people whose names, Luke Sheridan. I just did one with Ayan Hirsi Ali. There's a bunch. And there are more to come because people are now very interested in what's going on and asking me for interviews. I'm not sure that will yield anything because these private universities are hugely powerful, as you know. And it's very hard to hold their feet to the fire. They are a law unto themselves.
It is a fascinating situation that we do want to be respectful of your time. Professor Amy Wax at the University of Pennsylvania Law School, at least at the present time.
Please proceed.
Business students, business persons, or consumers, Business law impacts much of what you do. This segment is designed to help you get past the headlines on key stories. The United States Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that sleeping in public can be banned. The city of Grants Pass, Oregon, passed an ordinance banning people from sleeping or camping outdoors on public property. This is an eminently practical rule from my standpoint. If these areas are used for such purposes, the lawful purposes of public enjoyment and green spaces are denied to the citizens who are paying the taxes. These places are also not equipped with sanitation for food preparation and things like that. Sadly, in a number of cities, such encampments have turned into crime and drug dealing centers. Grants Pass has only 38,000 residents, but a reported 600 street people hang out there. This is a great burden. Allowing them to use public spaces exacerbates the problem. Violators under this new law are subject to a $295 civil fine for initial violations. However, this could increase to $1,250 and 30 days in jail for repeat offenders. The crime would be criminal trespass. A lawsuit was filed on behalf of the street people to stop enforcement of the ordinance. The U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal enjoined enforcement of the law. The Ninth Circuit held that it would violate the cruel and unusual punishments clause of the Eighth Amendment of the Constitution. And this would apply in the case, according to the Ninth Circuit, if there were no beds in homeless shelters. The city appealed to SCOTUS, which reversed. Writing for the majority, Justice Neil Gorsuch rejected the Ninth Circuit interpretation of SCOTUS precedents. The decision determined that enforcement of generally applicable laws regulating camping on public lands doesn't qualify as cruel and unusual punishment, and that public camping ordinances do not compare to prior SCOTUS cases cited by the Ninth Circuit.
Sustained.
Texas sues General Motors for allegedly violating drivers' privacy. A growing problem in our society is the collection of digital data from individuals without their explicit consent. General Motors and OnStar LLC, a subsidiary, have been sued by the state of Texas, which accused the automaker of installing technology on more than 14 million vehicles to collect data about drivers. If that was used internally to make better cars, probably would be okay. However, in a suit filed by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, he claims that General Motors sold the data to insurers and other companies without the driver's consent. According to Paxton, the suit resulted from a probe into whether various automakers collected and then sold mass amounts of data without the driver's knowledge. Paxton said GM's data were used to compile driving scores assessing whether more than 1.8 million Texas drivers had bad habits, such as speeding, braking too fast, steering too sharply into turns, not using seat belts, or, interestingly, driving late at night. Insurers could then use the data when deciding whether to raise premiums, cancel policies, or deny coverage, according to Paxton. It would seem to cover millions of vehicles, since he claims it has been installed in most GM vehicles since 2015. As soon as I saw this, I thought about the heavily advertised OnStar system, and indeed Paxton said that the enrollment in this system was wrapped into normal auto purchasing and leasing paperwork, which, as many know, is usually many pages and not everybody reads every word. Paxton stated companies are using invasive technology to violate the rights of our citizens in unthinkable ways. Our investigation revealed that General Motors has engaged in egregious business practices and that violated Texans' privacy and broke the law. We will hold them accountable. GM replied in a statement, "We've been in discussions with the Attorney General's office and are reviewing the complaint. We share the desire to protect consumers' privacy." The suit seeks the destruction of the improperly collected data, compensation for drivers, civil fines, and other remedies. This was filed under the very pro-consumer Texas Deceptive Trade Practices Act, DTPA.
Motion denied.
The Supreme Court won't hear challenge to Illinois' ban on assault weapons and other gun appeals. SCOTUS refused to take up several Second Amendment-backed challenges to an Illinois law that prohibits so-called assault weapons, such as the popular AR-15 rifle. The surprise ruling means that the Illinois law will remain on the books, at least for now. Surprise because some of the same SCOTUS recently ruled that bump stocks could not be banned by the U.S. Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Agency. This was a device that became infamous due to the mass shooting in Las Vegas. It allows a regular rifle to be fired quickly. The holding determined that Congress and not the ATF would have the power to make such a determination. The ruling also was in contrast to SCOTUS's ruling in 2022 with the case of New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Brune. The High Court upheld the Second Amendment right for the public to bear arms in public for self-defense. Therefore, any limitations had to meet a high test, what is referred to as the strict scrutiny test. What that means is if there is a law that limits a constitutional right, like the Second Amendment, it must be narrowly structured to only serve the public good and not impair constitutional rights. The Illinois state law in question made it a felony offense to have assault weapons, including AR-15s. The trigger was a mass shooting that involved an AR-15 and resulted in 7 dead and dozens injured during the 4th of July parade in 2023. It is likely that lawsuits pending against the Illinois statute will continue in the lower courts. The issue seems likely to return to the Supreme Court in the future. Some may ask if further Second Amendment cases against the statute might return to SCOTUS. Why did SCOTUS not review it now? The selection of cases by the High Court is tough. 4 of the 9 justices must agree to hear a case. It must be ripe for consideration. In this case, some of the conservative justices were outvoted. In fact, Justice Thomas stated that the AR-15 is the most popular semi-automatic rifle in the United States and is in common use today. This would seem to telegraph his support for keeping this weapon available to the public. To give our audience an idea of the number of cases decided by SCOTUS each year, over the previous 10 years, the most cases decided was 82 and the least was 47. Think about the thousands of cases that might have been presented to the High Court in that time.
Please raise your right hand.
President Trump announced that the legal 6-month point has been now enforced. Harris's expensive Secret Service detail will end at that point. Apparently, the Biden handlers decided to give her 18 months instead of the standard 6 months. The new announcement ends the abuse of money and the limited Secret Service resources. I note that she has extensive family resources and is heading out on a book tour with a ridiculous advance from the publisher. The book, 107 Days, will be published by Simon & Schuster on September 23rd. It is about her failed presidential campaign. I wonder if she will really detail the incredible waste of over $1 billion in her campaign. I've been unable to determine her publisher's advance, but hopefully the publishers will lose their shirts on the silly venture. Rumors are from several million up to 10 million.
Objection, Your Honor.
Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. Saving America welcomes Dr. Danielle Lord. She is a native of the Pacific Northwest and has spent her career helping to develop others, creating unique curricula for organizations large and small, and served as a university professor. She holds a PhD in leadership theory. Her bio says that her superpower is helping people to connect the dots, making and discovering connections that might not have been realized before. Dr. Lord's firm is called Archetype Learning Solutions. She's recently started a webcast on USA Global Network. We welcome Dr. Danielle Lord for her first appearance on Saving America.
Well, thank you, Dr. Schein. I hope it's the first of many. This is such an important topic. I think it's very well connected with the conversations that I'm having about really making sure we can bring compassion back into the world because it's so lacking right now.
Sounds like a winner to me. As you know, we asked our guests 3 questions that we've researched in advance. So number 1, tell us, our audience, about how leadership differs from management.
I am always happy to talk about this particular topic because it is still very misunderstood. And there are still plenty of people out there who are saying they're the same thing. They are not the same thing. They are very different. It is my hypothesis that our management practices are really rooted in a historical element of the industrial era in which we collectively came together and started working as humans in factories. At that point in time, that industrial era, kind of the Victorian era, it was actually illegal, at least in the Western European context of Britain, to live in poverty. It was illegal to be poor. And you had people clamoring for jobs that paid pennies per day. It was very easy to be let go or terminated from that job because someone was always waiting to pick it up. So our whole context of work is rooted in that paradigm, which was all hail the machine. The machinery, the equipment, the automation was very brand new to industry, and everything that we knew was about making sure that those machines ran efficiently, and we needed management to do that. So management by definition is about a transactional process that includes budgeting, prioritizing, scheduling, tasking, making sure things are staying in line with the work that needs to be done to accomplish the goals. That does not require any human relationship. And that's where leadership becomes so important, and how leadership is different from management. It's making sure that those things are happening through influence-based positive relationship in which the leadership and the team members are working together towards those goals. So that's my definition.
Fascinating. What can our audience learn from your latest book? Tell us a little bit about that.
So thank you. I just published my latest book. It's called Engaging Your Employees. We are facing an engagement deficit in this country, and I would probably say worldwide. Engagement scores are, of course, what we call employee engagement is what is defined by Gallup as the discretionary effort that our employees or our team members, as I like to call them, put forth in the organization. For 30 years, we've been telling people that your voice matters. And for 30 years, I haven't sat across the table with executives for 30 years, but basically the time that I have spent, about half of that, around the same tables with executives, listening to their conversations, has told me that the voice doesn't matter, the voice of the employee. And from my hypothesis is that if we want to lead through a relationship, influence-based relationship, we have to have a personal relationship of presence, vulnerability, and authenticity with the people that we are leading. So my book outlines 12 heart-centered strategies that 11 of them are completely free. It just requires you to have some vulnerability and some presence and engage with people in an entirely different level. The very same things that our employees or our team members are asking for. So that's my latest book. You can get the book. It's available on Amazon, and in the back there are 12 or 13 QR codes, and you can scan those QR codes and download a variety of tools to help you implement those heartfelt strategies.
Fascinating. And our third question is, what's the best advice you can give to a business student or early career executive about achieving success? Because we talk about, if you want to be successful, you need to be more than a manager. You have to be a leader. So where does that come in, and how would you talk to your younger self or to someone that you know?
And to all of my graduate students, I talked to them about the notion of the relationship, the leader team member relationship, and that is where you get the biggest bang from your buck. It doesn't come from ego. And that's the biggest problem that we have, I think, in our organizations today, is that we see the ego continue to perpetuate. We see the ego continuing to be rewarded. In our organizations, we are still rewarding for performance, not behavior. And there was a fascinating study, and it grew legs and walked off. I can't find my original copy, but it was from 1989 from Dr. Fred Luthans, who said that most as successful, as he defined them, so for those listening, I just used air quotes around successful, but our successful leaders are promoted based on the notion that they have made somebody else look good. And that was either through securing a large contract, bringing in a large amount of money, whatever that looked like was not necessarily always in the best interest of the team members or the people who make up the organization. So I always tell leaders, aspiring leaders in business, make sure that there's no trail of dead bodies behind you as you ascend into leadership roles. It is not about stepping on people. It is about lifting them up to make the organization a much better place. I've had my own very fascinating self-discovery, if you will, over the 2.5 years that I have been in business for myself. And I taught the innovation course. I was the lead faculty at the graduate school where I was at. And the MBA students were required to take a course on innovation. And part of that course was this idea of getting our business leaders to understand that innovation, creativity only comes when the mind is completely free of stress, the mind and the body, because it's an interconnected thing, right? The mind and the body have to be completely free of stress in order to be creative and innovative. And we're not free of stress when we have leaders that are micromanaging us, when we have leaders that are promoting toxic behavior, when we have leaders that are chastising everything that we do. And I thought I was in a position that I really was free from stress. I had executive level positions that I held and really believed that I was free from all of that. And it wasn't until 2 years into being in my own business as an business owner, that I really discovered that, wow, I am far more innovative and creative now being out there on my own than I ever was, even at the executive level, functioning at that level. So business leaders, again, in air quotes, leaders, you got to have the influence, you got to have the relationship. So when I say leaders, that's who I'm referring to, but leave the ego behind. It is really about lifting up the employees of your organization so that the organization can be successful, not necessarily you. You will be successful if you're doing the right thing.
Now, we are seeing finally an improvement in opportunities for women. Do you give different advice to women than men, since women have been used to now, gee, it's terrific, I'm moving into management, but the transition from management to leadership may be a little bit more difficult for women?
I do absolutely believe that that is a truth. And I think what happened was, in the 1980s, I think we had enough scientific research or data to really demonstrate what good leadership looked like. And that's when we did start to see women enter into those leadership positions in 1980s, 1990s. I think what happened with women is that we adopted a toxic feminism approach to leadership positions or leadership roles, thinking that I have to act just like the men acted. In fact, I have to go one step further and be more masculine and more manly than the men were. And I think what that embodied was this idea of toxic feminism. I think we had a fantastic and missed opportunity to come in as our true authentic selves as women who are the carriers of culture, who are known to be kind and genuine and large-hearted, and really show what great leadership looked like. I think that was a big miss.
Fascinating. And as you know, we try and keep this short so people will actually listen to these interviews. But how can our audience get more information about you and your book and the things you're working on?
Thank you. So you can call or text me at my business line, which is 253-269-2116. I take calls or text messages. You can also email me at Danielle@archetypelearningsolutions.com. And the things you think about when you're naming your business, you don't think about how long the email address is going to be. But Danielle@archetypelearningsolutions.com. That is also my website. You can find my website at that same address, archetypelearningsolutions.com.
May I remind you, you're still under oath.
As we grow up, a common reference for success or failure is the letter grade. Whether we're in grammar school or college, we all want an A grade and certainly regard an F as a big failure. Here at Saving America, we scan the news for reports of celebrities, politicians, or others who just end up in the public eye So the A grades are awarded to people and organizations for great service to their communities. And the F grades, of course, are unfortunately more common, are awarded to those who need to do a lot better. The badge of dishonor today belongs to the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, for letting the dangerous Tren Agua gang members into the country, including a free plane ride across the country, and to Special Prosecutor Sheila Ross, the Georgia prosecutor, asked for life in prison rather than the death penalty. So the scourge of the earth is allowed into this country and given something called parole by ICE. That included a work permit. At taxpayer expense, they fly him to New York City. His fingerprints are checked and he is confirmed as a criminal, but they still allow him to stay in the United States. He reportedly committed a separate criminal act, but again, is not prosecuted or tossed out of the country. He gets a free plane ride at his request for a humanitarian flight to Georgia. The trial evidence against him was overwhelming. This was a clear-cut case for the death penalty. He has just been convicted on all counts of murdering the 22-year-old nursing student, Laken Riley, in Athens, Georgia, in February of this year. Why? Why was this not an express ticket to death row? There is no point to taxpayers feeding and housing this excuse for a human for another 50 to 60 years. So Saving America awards today's F grade to the ICE, and especially for the Soros-backed prosecutor, Sheila Ross, who did not ask for the death penalty for the gang member and cold-blooded murderer of Laken Riley.
Silence in the court.
F grade for governors of Maine and Wisconsin, who will hopefully soon disappear from political office forever. We have more on number one, Maine Governor Janet Mills. During a recent governor's meeting in D.C. with Trump, she got into an argument with Trump about allowing boys and girls sports. Trump said Maine needs to comply with his executive order banning boys and girls sports. Mills said, "See you in court." Not wanting her to get the last word, Trump remarked that this was okay with him since time for Maine to have a better governor. Not to be outdone in the who can be dumber and more anti-American competition, Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers spoke out against deportations of criminals here illegally. Previously, he vetoed a bill banning boys from girls' sports. Despite Evers' position, the Wisconsin Interscholastic Athletic Association has just recently announced that it will comply with Trump's executive order preventing trans athletes from competing in girls' sports. So, Saving America awards today's F grades to Maine Governor Janet Mills and Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers for being out of touch with the American people.
I'll allow it.
Putin sticks his finger in Trump's eye. On the good news, bad news front, things are worse in Ukraine. Putin has launched multiple missiles and drones against civilian targets in Ukraine. And I emphasize, civilian targets. In just one such attack, at least a dozen civilians are dead and dozens more injured. This is despite Putin claiming that he wants to reach a deal. Trump has finally turned up the sanctions, but much more needs to be done. This is simply murder by Putin, nothing less. In an odd twist, Zelensky met with Trump privately while both were attending the late Pope Francis's funeral in Rome. Rumors are that this was prearranged. The deal for much more American help, in turn, for America's access to rare earth minerals, is now being fast-tracked.
Order in the court.
Fortunately, being stupid does not prevent a person from facing criminal charges. Ruth is the oddball who is accused of setting up a sniper's nest near a golf course where Trump was playing. Fortunately, the nest was discovered by the Secret Service before he could shoot down anyone. My understanding is that the evidence against him was compelling. Obviously, the jury agreed. The comedy show here was that Ruth represented himself. His antics were crazy. Frankly, I think he was trying to set up an insanity plea or at least diminished capacity. His opening statement was a total non sequitur. After being warned by the judge, he was eventually cut off, I believe only 7 minutes in. The rest of the trial did not go any better for him. We lawyers have a phrase: an attorney who represents himself has a fool for a client. That applies to non-lawyers as well.
Please proceed.
The Office Depot and Office Max holding company is acquired. The holding company, the two brands, is known as the ODP Corporation. The current stockholders got a nice margin over the current stock price. The buyer was Atlas Holdings. The ODP operation will now be part of a privately held company. Naturally, the transaction will be subject to regular regulatory requirements. I'm against corporations buying up their competitors. In this case, the deal is not optimal, but at least they are not being acquired by Staples or another big box operation.
Sustained.
No surprise here, Dems are slow learners. Back-to-back pathetic performances by Kamala Harris and Joe Biden prove that there is no learning curve for the Dems. Harris' presentation was a mess. If she wanted to show herself as a potential governor for California and or a future presidential candidate, she blew it in her typical fashion. If anything, she has declined since her horrible run for president. Then somebody let Demented Joe have a press conference after his ridiculous performance at an event a couple weeks ago. Hiding these two is the only strategy that would work for the Dems right now.
Motion denied.
Texas Governor Abbott responds to Dem lawmakers' hateful remarks. The latest scumball Dem to gain publicity for stupidity is Texas Representative Jasmine Crockett. She doubled down on stupid by referring to Texas Governor Abbott, who has been in a wheelchair for about 40 years, as Governor Hot Wheels. She said this at a recent Human Rights Campaign dinner. Abbott said that he found the remark disrespectful. As a typical out-of-touch Dem, she claimed it was because he wants to block illegals from entering the U.S., not his disability. Then when Abbott's supporters called her out, she attacked them, not apologizing for her own insensitivity about human rights.
This session is adjourned.
Thanks for joining me for Saving America. If you have questions or comments, please find me on various social media sites. I'm Dr. David D. Schein.